when we started our project in Ukraine, we looked at the Ukrainian economy in general, and we saw that there's a lot of engineering technical talent. We have really good programmers, probably some of the world's best programmers.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying something like this, that Ukrainians are one of the best.
Exactly. So IT is really hot, but if you look at most of the IT programmers, what they do is they do outsourcing, and fundamentally outsourcing is an export of services. So when we started our activities, we set out to change this. We set out to help these young engineers become entrepreneurs, and as opposed to export their services, to create locally made startups, which will provide to them, to their teams, and to the Ukrainian economy much more value added. And we set out on this global goal of establishing a small Ukrainian ecosystem of IT entrepreneurs, something similar to the Silicon Valley in the US. What we're looking for is a business idea or a business startup that can scale from one or two people and $100 revenue a month to millions of dollars, which has significant innovation potential. New disrupting technologies. This is the kind of things we're looking for to support.
And what kind of disruptive technologies are there right now?
The Internet of Things is huge. Some of our guys are creating some amazing drones,
so they are building drones from scratch?
Exactly, yeah. And very interesting appliances and the control systems, apparel and fashion. Buying things. You buy clothes in stores. It's a very old industry, and there's a lot of things that can be changed. Or, for example, education, very old, very important, huge industry. And these two domains, I personally feel that have not fully taken advantage of new internet and mobile technologies which are available today.
We agreed on that the Ukrainians programmers are one of the best in the world. Are they taught in schools or they're self-made programmers?
Well, I mean, we do have a heritage from the Soviet Union, one of the good heritages, where our schools, universities are in general provide very good technical education, so mathematics, physics, and various engineering sciences. So that as a foundation serves as a very good starting point for our engineers and programmers. That's why they're good. I think the second phase was that the labor is very, very cheap. So many companies came here and established huge outsourcing operations.
But is it good for an ecosystem that many companies are outsourcing here?
Initially it was good because you took in great engineers and you plugged them into global technologies at a cheap price. Of course, makes sense for Western big companies, but that gave them the opportunity to learn the latest technologies, what's working and what's not. Now we need to make the next step, and now we need to actually create a startup ecosystem. Use that practical knowledge, which a good senior programmer can obtain working for a big outsourcing company, probably doing something for Facebook, Google, or Microsoft, or any of the big giants, and create something of his own.
But many people are saying that Ukrainian startups are really good at programming, but really bad at marketing and sales. Is that true?
The Western world has a much better innovation system, which is exactly composed of incubators, accelerators, technoparks, various educational initiatives that help young engineers obtain practical knowledge, which is not taught at school or in universities, which is how to be a good businessman, how to sell your product, how can you market your product. It's not only about a great technical product. It's also about a product that is economically viable, that is appealing to your customers. It's also knowing who is your customer and how do you reach your customers. So it's a huge set of hands-on expertise, which is very difficult to obtain unless you're actually doing it. So that is lacking. I won't lie to you. In Ukraine, this is one of the biggest obstacles of converting engineers into successful entrepreneurs and business people.
And what about the difficulties that those startups are facing in terms of legal perspective, maybe some governmental obstacles?
Well, many challenges, but some of the biggest challenges is, of course, access to capital. So there's always a cat and mouse situation where you have a great idea, you form a team, you try to make a prototype product, but then money starts to run out. Most of these people are young people. So unless you have rich parents, you don't have a lot of life savings from your previous job. And it's a question of how much money do you have in order to get as far as you can with your business before you're really investor ready and are ready to compete, probably even on international markets for angel and venture capital. And that's tough. This is some of the biggest gaps. And if you look at early stage financing, which is available in Western Europe, readily available, not to mention California and Silicon Valley, you can kind of walk into a coffee shop and you'll see a bunch of angel investors ready to give you a couple $100,000. In Ukraine, there's a huge disconnect. There's very few angel investors professionally investing in early stages. If you go international, then you have to look for later rounds, because most of the angel investors prefer to have that company in your backyard.
Not in the Ukraine.
Huh?
Not in the Ukraine.
Not in Ukraine. That's a bit too far out. Exactly. So either they're faced with the difficulty of relocating and immigrating abroad, being in the same city where their angel investor or their group of angel investors is, so they can interact almost on a daily basis, or they have to wait until later rounds, like Series A rounds, where the investors are looking for more mature companies that are more easier on geography, but then it's much harder because it takes more time, you need to deliver much more, and in business you need money. You need money to grow your product. There's so far you can go just on your own capital and on your own enthusiasm. So this is the biggest challenge. And when we entered Ukraine, we saw that there was really no innovation infrastructure. There were no systems that could actually help startups become investor ready, so that they had a chance of actually raising some money, because there's no point to bring a startup which is very immature and present it to professional investors. The chances would be zero for that company to raise any kind of capital. And we set out to establish first IHUB, which we're in it right now, IHUB Kyiv. The project is funded by the Norwegian government. So it's a social entrepreneurship initiative. We're not for profit, we're social players. And the Norwegian government is significantly supporting our work, because the biggest challenge with startups and us is if we offer our services, and we offer two types of services. One is the physical infrastructure, like you said, co-working and the ecosystem. And the second one is training, education, master classes, and providing them the hands-on practical knowledge and expertise.
But why Norwegian government is helping Ukrainian ecosystem?
This is a very good question. The Norwegian government, as many Western nations, have certain donor budgets, and they support the neighboring EU countries in order to improve their economy, their level of democracy, and their level of competitiveness, and in general try to bring nations like Ukraine, like Moldova, like Georgia, closer to Western Europe and the EU, hopefully with the long-term view of these nations joining the European Union. Under exactly these programs, we have over the years have been very fortunate to be receiving support from them in order to establish such institutions. Because as you understand, if we take away their support, our services become extremely expensive for the young startups. And many of these companies don't have a lot of money. These are not big companies that can provide good fees for consulting services. So the Norwegians come in order to make this system actually work. They provide their funding in order.
Can you mention the numbers? Can you mention the numbers?
I can't
what's
mention
your budget?
the exact number, but it's big. It's significant funding. And as part of the last project, which we're now running, the goal is to establish at least 4 IHUBs in Ukraine. One we've already done. We're in it right now, IHUB Kyiv, which hosts almost 30 startups, 100 entrepreneurs. And then 3 more across the regions. We're opening one in Chernihiv next week for about 45 entrepreneurs. We're also opening one in Lviv for about 70 entrepreneurs, and the one in Vinnytsia for about 60 or 70 entrepreneurs. And this is all going to be probably in the next 3 to 4.5 months. And all thanks to the Norwegian government. And that's only Ukraine. We're also opening one in Moldova, Chisinau, also this year. And the goal is the same, to establish a pan-Eastern European innovation network and provide both the physical support, the co-working space, but also the educational and mentorship support to the startups, and only focus on IT startups.
So Norwegian government is helping Ukrainian ecosystem, but what Ukrainian government
is
doing to help itself the country?
Well, you have to understand that Ukraine is now in a very difficult situation. The economy is almost in default. We are on life support. From the West, we are at war as well with Russia. It's no secret to anyone anymore. So it's very difficult to ask anything from the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian authorities to support our work. Having said that, we have very successful cooperation with the Ukrainian authorities thus far. And regional IHUBs will be opened in public-private partnership together with local communities. So the local municipalities, like the local cities, the local mayors, will, of course, we're not asking for any financial support, but they're offering their physical infrastructure, their buildings, their unused communal property, which has been, in most cases, standing for years, being deserted and just falling apart. So they're offering this as an input to the project. While, of course, we take on all the financial investments and all the operational and management and the setup, both investments and responsibilities. So it's an important step, I would say. It's an important step. And having said that the Ukrainian economy is now in such a difficult situation, it's also an important investment from the Ukrainian local authorities into our project as well. And into developing, we're doing the same thing. I mean, we have the same interests. The goal of IHUB is to grow the SME sector, focusing on IT startups. And local governments and the national government are also keen on developing the SME sector.
Do those authorities understand the potential of IT sector?
Yeah, I think this is the important part. I think they do. Having discussed this issue and this project extensively, both with Lviv authorities, including the mayor of Lviv, Mr. Sadovy, and very many deputies from the city council, I was surprised how well they understand the potential of the IT sector. But they have very, very clear understanding of if they grow, then this can be multi-million, even billion-dollar opportunity for their local economies, for the taxes, and for the general, ecosystem of those cities and Ukraine at large. So they do see the potential, and they're also willing to invest and wait until our investments today will actually bear fruit in the long run, because our project is not a short term, but it's a long term project.
And what about the legal perspective? Is the law in the Ukraine is it helping somehow to establish a new company?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems within the small business is the fact that minority shareholders have essentially no protection. This is one of the biggest obstacles if you think about starting up small startups and raising angel and venture capital, because all of those investors come in minority stakes, and they need to have some kind of instruments to influence the operations of companies.
How does the recent events, how they are influencing the situation in the Ukraine in terms of entrepreneurialism or help from the Western countries?
The war, of course, impacts everything negatively. I mean, without any doubt. It's very difficult socially. It's terrible economically. But I think most of the startups are young people, and
they are positive. They are thinking positive.
They try to think positive. Yeah, they try to think positive.
One of the biggest advantages of Ukrainian people are their born entrepreneurs, or there are different features that are helping them to grow those startups.
Well, I think there is a combination of several things. First of all, it's the technical background. We have some of the best workforce. Second, we're very close to Europe. I mean, a couple of hours flight from any major European city, so it's easy to access the markets. Very cheap labor, yeah, but at the same time very professional labor, and also culturally we're very close to Western Europeans. So between, for example, Chinese and Indian developers, our culture is much closer to Europeans. And I think in general, and we've seen some of the World Bank reports, Ukrainians are in general very entrepreneurial. I think, I can't remember the exact figures, but I think almost 40 or 45% of young people up to the age of about 30, 32 are willing to, make the leap of faith and risk it all and try to start up their own business, which is quite high figure in general when you look at older Europe. That's having said that, also people understand that if you just go and work for someone, the salaries are pretty low and the upside isn't that as great. There's not such a good social support system and so on. So many people are willing to risk in order to make something of themselves.
They do not believe in the government, that the government will help them when they will be very old.
Well, that's true as well. Unfortunately, in the past, the government wasn't an institution that many people believed in or even paid much attention to it. This is changing now. It's important change as well. But people believe in themselves, and when the wages are low, what can you do? You can leave the country, or you can start your own business and be in control of your fate. And I think this is what the Ukrainians are trying to do.
You mentioned leaving the country. There is one startup called egoist.me, and it moved from Kyiv, I think, from the Ukraine, to Krakow. Are there many other stories of startups that left Ukraine?
They were our resident actually in the past. So I know egoist.me still very well, even 2 years ago when they were just getting started. They attended to many of our events, even our intensive investor training and investor conferences. Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, I think just in the past 4 months, about 4 or 5 startups, our startups, have left to Europe and to the US.
Why? Because of the international situation?
Well, it's difficult to judge individually, but in general, if you look in general at this demographic of people, they don't want to leave. They have their families, they like Ukraine, they want to live here. But unfortunately, the ecosystem isn't as good as it is in London or the US or anywhere in Western Europe. So people realize that they don't have the right tools in order to make full advantage of their potential. It's a long-term game. The fruits come actually all the time. We have companies here with $30,000-$40,000 revenue per month. So they've been set up less than 6 months ago. So that's also some kind of a result already. So it depends on what result you're looking for. $1 billion company may take some time, but some of these companies are already profitable and scaling very quickly. Some of them have already raised significant funding, a couple $100,000, maybe $500,000. That's also a success story. In general, I think you have to look at long term, and looking at the long term, I think Ukraine has a huge potential. And the next things which you will see is after this quality phase, you'll come to the
after the quantity
phase, you'll come to the quality phase, and also you'll see much more initiatives going to the regions as well. Fortunately, regional development in general has been very poorly managed in Ukraine over the last 2 decades, and everybody were somehow going to Kyiv all the time. What you'll see in the future is more regional development and more initiatives going to the regions. Like ourselves, by the way, we're establishing regional initiatives. We're not trying to attract people from the regions to come to Kyiv, but we're coming to them and establishing similar institutions, because everything I've mentioned, all the pluses in setting up Ukrainian startups in Kyiv are magnified when you go to the regions. The Ukrainians can help you with more manpower, lower labor, and more specific expertise. And we share a border, we share a lot of cultural heritage, also problems.
We shared the organization of Euro 2012.
Yeah, like that as well. Yeah, so I think the opportunities are there. We just probably this could be one of the interesting topics to discuss with my Polish colleagues in the end of May when I attend the conference in Warsaw.
Okay, so thank you very much for your interview.
Thank you.